Thank you, Marielle, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join us. My name is Liz, and I have Kathy and Ruth here. We are with Vote-HOA-Now. We are the industry experts in electronic voting. We have been around since 2007 when electronic voting became available and legal in Oregon. We are also former community managers. We hold our credentials. And so education is very important to us. And so thank you for taking the time. And then as a reminder, anything that's covered today is meant to help you learn more, is designed for you to look at other sources of your documents, and of course, double check them with your association's legal counsel for any particular questions regarding your community. We will be utilizing the Q&A feature, and I will be behind the scenes making sure I get those answered throughout the presentation. In our outline today, we're going to go over the legal overview for authority for electronic voting, some different service provider options that you have out there available, and then we're going to dive into what type of resolutions and rules that you should look at for your community, and then we're going to go over any misconceptions and myths. And I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, Ruth for the legal overview.
Yes, thank you, Liz. I get to do the legal fun stuff.
Ruth is so good at the legal stuff.
We are not attorneys. Keep that in mind. We do recommend all the time that you ask your legal counsel because we don't know what's in your governing documents. So we're all a big proponent of that. There we go. So when we initially talk about all the e-voting codes, we're talking about a number of different statutes depending on what kind of product you are. So condominium, of course, is 718, co-ops 719 if we've got co-ops on with us, and the HOA statute is 720. Now we have some specific statute numbers listed here that talk in particular about electronic voting. So you'll always want to double check those sections. Of course, again, check with your attorney, check with your state, with your own governing documents. In the condo statute, there is an additional section under the administration code rules, and we've listed those there. So if you're taking a picture of anything and jotting numbers down, this is what to take a screenshot of so that you can read them for yourself. Make sure your board members, or if you are a board member, the rest of your board members, everybody knows that you need to follow those statutes. That's the one thing that you have to do when you're starting electronic voting. Follow the state guidelines, not guidelines, rules. Other statutes to look at when you are looking through your looking to send notices and things like that is you'll find there are statutes for the notice of the meeting of an election or a vote. So look for those statutes of those guidelines of when do you have to send it out? No less than 10 days, no more than 60, things like that. And keep in mind, sometimes your documents will conflict. So you want to make sure you follow the hierarchy of documents and look at the state statutes overrule for the most part, your own governing documents. Another statute to consider is the owner date of record. And what that is that is the date that you pull the list of people who are either notified for that there is a meeting, or if there's an owner date of record for those who are eligible to vote. Now, the owner date of record is typically only for an election. So amendments, you can change owners in and out of that vote when they do move. But that owner date of record is very important, especially when there's a really short window sometimes of voting for elections, might be 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You don't want to have to deal with all that. So if your governing documents don't really speak to it, but say that the board can set an owner date of record. As former managers, we always recommend that date get set. Set it the day before your notices go out so that you don't have to worry about any changes in and out. It'll just make your life a lot easier. Now, the last thing on this screen, we talk about e-voting does not mean by email. And yes, the Florida statute did change for condominiums slightly to allow voting by email. And that's a little bit of a different process. but we will talk about that coming up shortly. But for the most part, we are talking about using an electronic voting system. It's internet based. It's separate from your management software if you're using something like that. No apps typically are needed, but there's a lot of vendors out there that provide this service. So you'll want to compare them, contrast them, and we're going to go through things to look for coming up. But this, what we're talking about primarily, is different than just sending in a picture scanned document to an email address. So when you are looking at the codes, when you're looking at those statutes, what kind of language are you looking for? It's written all over the place, different, intermingles, words are substituted. So you got to look for all these languages. So you're looking for the word electronic or online. Those get interchanged all the time. And you're looking for the word ballot, voting, or even election. Amendments are often referred to as elections as well. So looking for that kind of thing. Again, looking for electronic notice, and that a notice is separate and separate item than an electronic vote. So oftentimes you may need somebody to opt in to receive both electronic notice and electronic voting. So they're two items separately. And that my favorite part is in the code, the statute that says that all those e-ballots or e-votes count towards quorum for your meeting, for your annual meetings. Best part ever right there. So you don't have to worry about how many head count come to the meeting. So it's a very important part of the code. It's in there. You don't have to look for it, but it is nice to find it and read it yourself. We can tell you it's in there. The other thing that you'll notice is missing from the code for electronic voting is there's no mention of that a proxy is needed with the electronic vote. So really saves a lot of confusion with your owners when, in the past, we know proxies have been confusing. They don't understand them. They write their own name in at the top of the proxy, and then they show up at the meeting with their proxy with their own name written in, when that would be just a straight vote for them when they get to the meeting. So no more confusing proxies there needed. And then also in the code that the ballots, the e-ballots or the e-votes count towards any reconvene thereof. So again, this might be something a little bit different in your own governing documents, how that's written, but get them to mesh together. Ask your attorney to make sure that any e-votes, if you run an annual meeting, if something happens, storms happen, things like that happen, we know it, and things need to be rescheduled. You just want to make sure that those votes count towards that rescheduled meeting.
Now, Ruth, we do have a question
Sure.
from Carlton. Their board passed a resolution for electronic voting. I read this must be provided going forward. The new management co wants to do a mail and email. What's your recommendation, or what say you?
Actually, we're going to get to that question in a little bit. So when we talk about resolutions, so let's just hold that one. If
Okay.
you don't mind. Yes. Yeah. And hierarchy of documents, actually, I kind of jumped ahead. We're going to get in a little more detail in that too coming up. But I just like to throw it in there because people always start asking those questions. So let's look further about the statutes themselves and what the language is. So this language, I'm showing the condo statute. It's pretty identical in the HOA and the co-op statute. So it's just some high level information about your electronic voting and that the association may conduct, you don't have to conduct, but you may conduct elections and other unit owner votes through an internet-based online voting system. If an owner consents, again, there's that consent thrown in there, electronically or in writing, so they can consent at the time of vote, and following requirements are met. Has to authenticate their identity. So you have to make sure that the person who actually owns the unit gets that invite email to vote and is the one voting. You have to authenticate that. The vote needs to be secret. So really high level confidentiality. So no owner will know how anyone else voted. And even the management company, if you have one, doesn't see how anyone voted. So you have to maintain that confidentiality, that secrecy requirement. Have to confirm a method of delivery. So typically that delivery method is email. And then we go on to the rest of the statute. I don't think my clicking is working. There we go. That the online voting system authenticates that owner's identity. So again, which is kind of duplicating there, ensures that the vote is not altered in transit. And a great way to do that is the next bullet by transmitting a receipt to that voter. So that person who votes, they will get that receipt, emailed receipt, and they know that their vote was captured correctly. So very important section there that covered really easily. And so then here we are again about that secret requirement for elections. Now it doesn't say about amendments, but elections, they have to permanently separate any authentication, identifying information. So therefore the vote needs to be tallied without it recording or showing who did that vote. And then, of course, you want an e-voting company that's going to be able to support you with any recount, inspection, or review of those votes. So here's, like I said, my favorite section of the statute, that e-votes count towards quorum. We don't have to read the whole paragraph out loud, but basically pursuant to that statute, that anyone voting electronically is counted as being in attendance for the meeting for the purposes of determining quorum. So really nice feature that the Florida put in this statute so that you know if you're running your vote in advance that you have enough people based on the e-votes that you can have your meeting, especially if, you know, people are all over the place. They're on vacation, they're in another part of the country when your meeting's being held. Even if you are doing virtual meetings, sometimes people can't attend. And so by having them vote electronically in advance, you've helped to establish your quorum so that you can have those meetings and take care of business.
Now, Ruth, would a recount inspection include the source of each vote?
So typically, not unless you had a lawsuit filed. That's when you would do a recount. Again, most e-voting systems, they're computer-based. It's simple math to do addition. The voting gets a little tricky, of course, if you have par values or percentage ownerships for a condo, for example. A one-bedroom may be different than a two-bedroom. So it's really nice that the computer does all that for you. Kathy, you can chime in here. In my 9 years here with the company, I've never had a simple recount needed. Did it happen before I
Me
came?
neither.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've heard of a couple of clients, or some of our clients having an owner that wants to look at the final report. And, like Ruth said earlier, if it's an election, it is secret. So there really isn't anything that they can see except for that lot or unit voted. And then, we typically will, if it's us, we'll be involved in a recount and do an additional audit. So those are the kind of things that you should be hearing from your e-voting provider, is that they can help you through any of those situations.
Yeah, so typically, a company like ours, our IT department would be able to go in and confirm that everything was counted accurately. But again, it's pretty simple math for that.
Good
All
questions.
Right. Yes. So how do you get started? The statute is pretty specific. The first thing you need to do is create a resolution. Now, the board authorizes in their meeting that they are going to start electronic voting and have, that option added for your owners. It's not wiping out other methods of voting. So it's an additional method, additional process that gives more opportunity for your owners to participate. They can still come to the meeting and vote in person if you're having a live meeting. They can still request a paper proxy so that they can assign it to their neighbor or somebody to vote on their behalf at the meeting in person. So it's another method. So the board would authorize that at their meeting, and then they're going to create their resolution. Now, here's where we always recommend as well, get your attorney involved. A lot of times they have a resolution already drafted. They do it for other clients as well. But you're going to create a resolution, and the state statute is pretty specific about what needs to go in that resolution as well. So the board has to honor a unit owner's request to vote electronically unless they opt out. They have to provide that they can receive the notice through an online voting system if they choose. They have to establish reasonable procedures and deadlines for them to consent to electronic voting. So the last bullet, you can see we crossed out. That was something that just changed recently. It used to be that the written notice of that resolution had to be provided 14 days before a meeting. It's dropped to 48 hours. So really nice there. So, but you still want to get that resolution in place. There is some part of the statute that has changed as well that kind of says, well, if the board kind of missed that deadline of getting that resolution in place, they can still do the e-vote, just get that resolution, make sure everyone knows it's out there and what their process is. lots of other new stuff. So this is
Yeah, I
something
think
else.
a really good time
Yeah.
to share the resolution, of course, start early, make sure you're leaving time, and then you can make that option available and the document with your save the date or something in your pre-planning before you get to your official
Yeah.
notice
And
would probably be ideal.
our deep dive number 1 is all about the resolution. So we'll go really, really deep into that. Kathy will go ad nauseum.
I'm on it. Gosh,
So
I hope not.
So this is another new segment that has been added to the statute for condos. Basically, that an electronic ballot can also be accepted via email if the association has not adopted an electronic voting platform. So think about that for a second. If you're not adopting a platform to have electronic votes, the association must designate a separate email address for the receipt, or must designate a particular email address for the receipt of electronically transmitted ballots. So that's when somebody can take a piece of paper, take a picture with their phone of their paper ballot or a proxy and email that to management or the board secretary or something like that. But it's a specific address that you have to provide to the association saying if you wanted to send in your paper ballot by email, this is where you email it to. So that's a whole nother layer built in there. And people will take advantage of it. So you got to decide which you want to do. Now, keep in mind for the electronic votes, it's secret, right? So nobody sees how anybody voted. So when they're transmitting it through email, now people are seeing how that person voted. So they're understanding that they are going to no longer have that secret requirement with their ballots. You have to let owners know that. So that's what this is all about. Also has some information here about what needs to be on that paper ballot if they are going to be emailing in their vote. So if you do just a generic type email form, you have to include a space for them to type in their unit number, their name, also which functions as their signature. They also have that nice little statement down there at the bottom that you're waiving your secrecy, your right to secrecy by emailing in a ballot. So lots of new stuff there that came up in the law recently.
There may be a question that could be answered here. There is an HOA president who is looking at a website provider to a number of HOA COAs. Oh, he is a website provider. I've looked at some of the online systems and the statuses. There doesn't seem to be any certification of the voting platform, just that it is anonymous and secure. Is that correct? That there is nothing the state needs to do to certify the voting system?
That is correct. No state in the United States currently has a certification of e-voting software. It's up to each association to look at your own statutes because every state is different. So if you have a second house somewhere else, know that these statutes don't apply necessarily there. These apply just to Florida. So it's up to you to determine that the software provider that you're choosing follows these statutes. There's no certification. Now, of course, we have certifications for education classes like this one that is done through the Florida DBPR, but they do not certify the platforms themselves. Great question there. Yeah.
And going back to some of the first slides, when you think about it, yes, this is where you're really going to find your guidance there on what is required with an e-voting platform.
So a little bit more specific on that condo code we talked about at the beginning. I was going the 719, 720, those kind of codes generally. So condo admin codes, these are the ones that hang up a lot of managers, especially or even owners when they board members when they're looking at a process versus an HOA process, and this is where they diverge. So, and the condo has additional rules, and this is what they are in those elections. That you have to provide at least 14 days of voting. That you have to have the candidates listed in alphabetical order by last name. That you can't say the word incumbent with their name. Now, that doesn't mean that the person who submitted their biography can't say that I was the past board president. They can absolutely say that, but you shouldn't be listing the name of, Mr. Smith, comma, incumbent. That you don't have write-ins on the ballot, which You know, sometimes that's a godsend and sometimes it's a little detrimental if you want volunteers to step forward. But yes, and that secret ballot requirement, again, if they're doing email, sending in their ballot by email, that code goes away because of that other prior, that new law. Now, we touched briefly a little bit on the owner date of record, and this comes from the Corporation Act. So a lot of people don't know where to find it, and it's in the Corporation Act. And it basically states that if not provided in the bylaws, the record date to determine those to notice and vote in an annual meeting is the close of the business day before the first notice is delivered to shareholders. So if you don't have something written into your governing documents, or you do and it's something similar, get that date established, as I mentioned before. That'll just help you in the long run. Kathy's favorite slide.
Yeah. No more running around door to door. Proxies have served their value for years and years and years. And even when we were managers, we relied on them a lot to reach quorum, at meetings and whatnot. But with technology today and electronic voting and other options, they're just really, you're going to see less and less of them. Managers, board members, don't put them in your packets, don't mail them out. You can make them available upon request if an owner would like a proxy. And maybe that's something that you mentioned in your save the date, that these are going to be the options. And if you'd like to pick something other than electronic voting, to let you know. No more proxies.
So let's go through that next slide on the hierarchy, and then we'll get to a whole bunch of questions answered, because this might answer a whole bunch right here too.
Mm-hmm.
So Kathy or Liz, somebody else loves talking about this one a lot. I can't remember who it is.
All of us.
Okay. So we mentioned it briefly, the hierarchy of documents, and everyone chime in. So as we can see, it's a pyramid, it's a triangle. The top, the federal level, is the highest rule of law in our country, right? So you have to follow federal guidelines. Then you have to follow your state. And so that's where all these statutes are coming from, the state.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that is that I didn't talk about state laws is oftentimes you do need that electronic signature on your ballot. So make sure your platform provides for an electronic signature. This is different than like a DocuSign or something. It's typically a process that gets followed where somebody puts in their name, their emails, creates a password, something like that, using a special code assigned to their unit or their home. Florida state law, actually, in this case, for the requirements for an electronic signature are identical to the federal law. So know that you're covering yourself federally and state law at the same time on that use. Then it would be your city or municipality. And we don't ever see any of them have anything to do with HOAs in regards to e-voting. That's all about backyard chickens and things like that. But then you come into your own governing documents and you're looking at your map, your plan or your plat, and then the CC&Rs, your articles of incorporation, and your bylaws. So when it comes to voting meetings, you're going to look at both your declaration, your CC&Rs, and the bylaws for the more specifics. So note that if something is higher up on that hierarchy, it is above that, so then it supersedes what is written in your governing documents. So if something is not talked about at all in your governing documents, but yet the state provides for it in the statute, you're golden, all set there. If the bylaws contradict the state statutes, the state statutes will prevail. So again, confirm it if you're finding contradictions from your attorney. Confirm with your attorney to make sure that you're good. A lot of times, when you do amend provisions and things like that, you'll get that taken out and updated in your bylaws. Anything else on there, Kathy, Liz?
I don't think so. And then, of course, last rules, regulations, resolutions. And
yes,
we love all those things that further clarify what the documents say.
Right.
Yes. As far
and that's
as
where
processes.
You're going to put in your resolution for, of course, when you're doing e-voting. And that's going to be all the little things that Kathy's going to get to in a little bit. So I think we might have answered some questions already.
Yeah, there is going
Mhm.
back to the owner date of record. There is a
Mhm.
question. If someone takes ownership of a condo after the first notice 60 days out from the election and before the 30 days before the election, when a ballot is sent out, that new owner can't vote.
So again, that's going to be, look at your bylaws, look at your docs, and determine if there's a date, a time frame of when that is set. If there's not, and it's up to the board's discretion to set that date, if the board sets the date that it's the day before the first notice goes out, then that's it. Keep in mind, owners who are new to the association typically don't vote. They don't know enough about the people in there, who's running, they don't know who everybody is, so they most often don't vote. If they do, they sometimes just vote for quorum only. So it's usually not so much of a critical scenario, but yes, look to see what that date is. If there's no date and it's allowed up until the day of the meeting, then you would be changing owners in and out. So. But most often, a lot of documents are silent on them. All right, so
So,
do we have some more questions first before we go through that apply to what we were just discussing?
I feel like we're going to cover a lot of these questions as far as service providers, different options. There's some specific questions as far as who gets the results.
Okay.
I think we'll cover and
Mhm.
rules. And so I think we're okay to move forward. I feel like we're going to
Perfect.
answer a lot of these.
Perfect. Great. Well, what trends are going to shape our future, our
yes,
path? We
yes.
all
Well,
saw what happened
we
during
know this
COVID.
electronic voting thing that's been legal in Florida for 10 years now is
Yeah,
definitely shaping our path. And
2015.
one of the most active states, by the way, as far as state statutes and changes and, different listening to everyone, making changes to that state statute, making it more and more what we're looking for and easier to follow. So these are fun. We love housing trends. We like to look at stats and whatnot. And I won't read all of them, but they are kind of fun to see. 33.6% of US housing is in community associations. I feel like that was a stat that they published last year. So that's kind of fun to know. I'm sure it's increased already. We are all seeing building going on everywhere in our communities.
I was going to say, especially new
60
development. Yes, for sure.
Yes, a lot. 60 to 65,000 community association managers, board members. That's a lot of people, managers. Kudos to you. I remember 10 years ago when no one knew what a community manager was, and that is not the case anymore. We're really being the community managers are more and being more recognized. Certifications, education, everything is really so much better than the olden days, I guess I could say.
I'm going to mention too, of
And
that
then
number, almost a third of, I'm sorry, almost a third of those are in the state of Florida alone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because I know
Yeah.
Well,
Florida
California's
is right around 20,000
Yeah.
licensed managers in Florida.
Yeah, and then California is like a third, and the rest of the country is everyone else.
Yeah.
The other third.
Anyway, sorry for the interruption.
Great
Love
stat.
it. And, I have to mention that even Florida has their own level of education that they require of the
Mhm.
managers too. So, a lot more in Florida than in some other states. Just the last one. This is so important. 101 million volunteer hours performed annually. That is a lot of time, board members. You're taking the time today to educate yourselves and learn more. And that is just, a new stat where, years and years ago, there was hardly any education available to board
It's a
members. So,
thankless job. We know that, but
Which is
managers are thankful for you.
yeah,
Trust me.
we appreciate the time you put in.
Yes, and vendors.
and look at that value. You have to read the last one, $34 billion estimated time provided by volunteer
I'm going to
members.
say
So
managers don't get paid enough either. But anyway, I know some people might shoot me for saying that, but they don't get paid enough.
Yeah. And thank you for the Foundation of Community Association Research to provide all those stats.
Yes. But that's not all. You've got some eco-friendly people out there. We're all looking at ways we can save our planet, and some of these stats are really fun. I always say the first one, 1,000 people is saving over 25 pounds of paper. I always thought, how tall would that stack be of 500 sheet reams? So we're going to have to figure it out at some point. It does have the lowest carbon footprint. It does help with the environmental impact and the budget impact to communities now that are able to send that information out electronically. Use every opportunity that you can to say, would you like to receive your notices electronically instead of by paper, and begin that conversion. Like Ruth said earlier, it is different from electronic voting and electronic notices. So they really do have to say yes to both of those. And then, of course, we see it time and time again, doubling, tripling quorum for these communities who were unable to reach it before. It is going to increase that participation, and your owners are going away much more educated than they ever have been. So this is a fun one. I'll just touch on the worried about an older group. Actually, they are some of our best voters. We're always amazed to see this, but they have the time to sit down in front of their computer, open up their email, and read every single email. I know my dad does every single day. And they are some of our fastest voters. They'll read all the information, make their selections, and submit their ballot, and they are reaching quorum faster than some of our mixed age communities. So just a lot of really fun stats here too, but don't underestimate them. And if you want to treat them special, or someone that does not have access to a device or something, make a voting night. If you have a clubhouse, do a voting evening. Lots of fun ideas we've heard.
And as a millennial, at over 72 million people there, I prefer electronic. You're going to get my attention by email much quicker than you are by snail mail. So
I'm going to mention I've worked with Vote-HOA-Now a few times, and there's a high rise down in Pompano. That's one of the more recent times. They've been struggling for years to get enough people voting on particular items. And when this platform was implemented, and please don't mistake this for a sales pitch. I just want to speak to the as an outside source. I do not work with Vote-HOA-Now as an employee, but I just want to speak to the fact that using this platform got enough people to vote for projects that they've been struggling to get people to participate in for years. It was uber successful. So back to you, ladies.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. We're happy to hear that. And so many fun tools with electronic ballots too. So you can really get your message out there. Okay, let's talk about service providers and get through this portion so we can answer some more of the questions out there. Now, of course, we've got our full service provider. We consider that the highest level of security for a community association. It just means that there are no board members, committee members, managers in the middle of the voting process. That third party is going to take care of that, freeing your manager up to do the work that they're contractually obligated to do through the agreement that you have with your management company. We always say, let the professionals do what they do best. I can't imagine Jeffrey coming out and mowing your lawn because his, specialty is law. So he might know how tall the grass needs to be, but, we wouldn't hire him to do something else. And then, right. And then, of course, really very important, especially if you've got some sensitive items that you're voting on, or maybe you just really want to be fully transparent, like we're hiring a third party separation. This means that the board, committee, and the manager will not be involved in the vote. So those are all really great things to report to your community. Now, of course, there is the self-service portal or management software. Florida does, like we talked about, have some of the highest expectations of electronic voting. So this definitely is going to be more work for the manager. Oftentimes the committee, the board members are involved in the process. And, that's just another layer of, they might know what the results are. And we really don't want them to see those things until it's been announced to the community. It's not that third party separation, and you don't have a professional to go back to say, what was the process we followed? What were the steps that we took to get here? Probably should be very, very important for you to write down the whole entire process that you followed so you can be ready if something is challenged. And then, of course, with all of that said, it definitely does create more risk for the association because you're putting yourself in a different area where someone could challenge the vote and you may not be able to answer some of those questions. And we've even seen then some of those votes come to run electronically because there were so many questions in the initial vote that they finally turn around and hire a third-party service provider. So we always love to say, they're cheap. There's a lot of cheaper options out there. But in most cases, your owner's information that you're providing to that company become the product that they are trying to get. So be sure and ask, what do you do with our emails? What is your security? Those types of things if you are going to use one of the self-service portals. And make sure you're just not throwing that information out there on a SurveyMonkey doc or a Google Doc or something like that. So, of course, we've talked about it. All vendors are not the same. We just went over the full service and the self-service, but just nice to know that your professional partner understands the HOA industry. It is unique in itself and does have some, it's different from property management, community management. So it's nice that your team knows exactly what you're going through, what a set of documents is, providing that third-party separation and provides education to the industry that they're very serious about making sure that all of our board members and managers have that knowledge so that they're able to answer those questions.
And it's okay to ask for references from those companies you are requesting proposals from. I see there's different questions in the chat as far as, do they meet the Florida HOA law? Are they going to meet, House Bill 913? Definitely interview, go to their webinars, their demos, ask them for clients they have in Florida as reference to make sure they are meeting those state statute requirements.
Good point, Liz. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot that won't even know what statutes you have.
Right. Yes. Well, you may have to go up 5 or 6 layers to get to someone who knows who a state statute is. That's what I always say. The first person is not. Okay, so let's go into the resolution or rule we've all been waiting for as the highlight of the day. When you are ready, plan early. Some of the Florida voting season, there still is time to put this in place if you're voting after the first of the year. So be as concise as you can. We've already talked about following both the state statutes and your governing documents and looking for those areas where you are going to use a resolution to further explain the process. If there is some contradictions, you may need some legal advice to help your way through. Set the guidelines for each. An in-person meeting, what's going to happen there? How are we going to accept ballots? Online only. Maybe I'm having a virtual meeting. Very difficult for me to take a nomination from the floor or something like that. So all of these things can go into the resolution explaining that, the call for candidates period is going to be the period where a candidate would come forward and let us know that they'd like to run for the board. And then we've got the ever popular, amazing hybrid version of meetings. And this is a version of, electronic and in person. So lots to consider, but, put a little bit of information in there about each of them. Timing, what are the notice requirements? How many days do they have to vote? Make sure that you've got a good call for candidates period. This is the way that you're going to be the most successful. You can always have someone volunteer for a committee or on the board or something. That can be outside of the election process. So once the candidates have been received, it's nice to know that you don't have to worry about it anymore. And those are the candidates going to go on the paper ballot and the electronic ballot. And then, like I said earlier, candidate, electronic ballots are so fun. You can have bios, pictures, the paragraph of intent. They can complete a resume or a form that you have, and all of those things can be made available to the owners, and it can be in your resolutions. They know exactly what to expect. Now we get this question all the time. Should I be involved? Should the manager be involved? Should the board be involved? Typically, we are working with the manager, if there is a manager, or a trusted individual in your community. If you're a board member and we've got these state statute requirements, your professional provider should make sure that they're protecting you from any information that you should not see, and they should help and guide you through that process. If you're a self-managed board, which we still have a huge amount of self-managed communities out there. It is nice if it's a neutral party who has no ownership, which is that full service provider, available to answer questions. The manager is going to be able to look at the documents and answer those questions. What is quorum for the election? What is quorum for the amendment? How long should voting be open? And any other information that they're pulling out of their governing documents to put in the resolution. Provide approvals. They're going to be looking at everything, making sure everyone's name is spelled correctly. There's no incumbent on the ballot, and all of those requirements, of course, of the state statute are met. And so it's nice to know that management is going to provide the final approvals. And of course, typically that single point of contact is who we work with. And I think it's pretty true of everyone, is that that person, whether it be the manager or the attorney, the CPA, is going to take those final reports to the meeting with them to announce the results. Now, we haven't said anything at all about paper. Maybe it's on the next page, so let's move forward. Yeah, we do have some paper in there, so I'll get to that. So voting setup, what is the quorum? Do we have a secret ballot, which typically we do with the elections? Not so much with membership votes, amendments or those types of things can be not secret. How many positions? What are the terms? These are always fun things for owners to know, so it's good to have them on that information that you're sending them. We've got that owner data record popping up here again. It is a nice feature to be able to rely on, and you might find it in your governing documents, or you can set your own owner data record, which is typically the day you're pulling that list and you're opening up voting, so for an election. And like Ruth said, really no requirement for the owner data record for a membership vote. Now, these paper mailings, you're still going to have a few paper ballots. They're going to come sealed in your secrecy envelopes and everything if you have an election. So make sure that you're planning on how to process those. Does it mean if you're having a completely virtual meeting that those are going to be opened by video, the day of the meeting, but maybe earlier? So if you wanted to tune in, you could watch. Does it mean that those are going to be opened at the meeting, that we're still going to pick a couple of trusted individuals at the meeting to open and count those ballots through a process that has been trusted, and used prior to the electronic voting? So, let them know what they're going to do. What happens if they vote by paper, electronic, by proxy, and they come to the meeting? Thank you for paying attention. We love you, and we want you to be engaged at that level. So, but which ballot is going to prevail? So it's always nice to think about that. Of course, we always say if they vote electronically, the electronic ballot prevails. I don't think that's anywhere in the state statute, but, Jeffrey probably is thinking right now that he has an answer for that question. And then, of course, the delinquency requirements and documents. A lot of you have that section that says that no owner who is delinquent can vote. And they have all the way up until the day of the meeting to pay whatever it is that they owe. Now, we all want a big fat check at the meeting. Of course, we want them to walk in and pay their balance, and we'll hand them a ballot and we can close that matter off our list. But we all know it doesn't happen very often. But make sure that you're remembering those little processes at the end before you close the vote. And then, of course, who's the winner? This is always a fun one. It's coming up more and more now. What happens if we have a tie vote? Is it going to be, we're going to ask one of the people to step down? Are we going to do rock, paper, scissors? Are we going to do a revote with ballots? Be thinking about how that might look. I always think that the tie is for third position, but we've had the tie in first position and second position with the total amount of votes. So it's fun to, and good to plan what you're going to do if you do have a tie vote. And if you don't have anything or you haven't thought about it, you get to the meeting, ask the membership what they want you to do, if you don't have a plan. So I bet you're going to get a lot of fun ideas at that meeting. And then, of course, it is true of anything that you do after your experience. Make sure that you're updating those resolutions or rules so that you have everything that you missed and you're removing the things that you didn't really even need. So I always consider that a document that's going to continue to grow with the community and the board and the members.
All right, Ruth,
Okay,
are there
so
any
now,
questions you think we should get to? Or
Yes, I think there's a group of questions we can answer that relate into the resolution and kind of clarify some of these things. The first one is, yes, the e-vote typically happens in advance of the meeting. People are asking, like, how does that process work? Yes, just like you would mail out your official notice in the past with the proxy, that's when e-voting would start. So those kind of align together. You have the date that your e-voting ends, similar to when you would have required your proxies to be mailed back to the office. The e-vote ends, the results get sent typically to the management, and they carry that to the meeting with the list of who voted. Again, it doesn't show how people voted, so that somebody coming into the meeting can then say, oh, I need to vote, and you can confirm they're not on the who voted list, and then hand them a paper ballot so they can still vote in person. So I think we had a few questions around that. Of course, that also means then if you haven't made quorum with your e-voting, then anyone coming to the meeting who hasn't already e-voted, yes, you're going to head count them, and that gets added to the numbers and to determine that you have quorum so that you can start your meeting. Somebody asked about the Kaufman language as far as the hierarchy of documents. And the Kaufman language, for those who aren't familiar, is that phrase that's in your governing documents that, like, as it can be amended from time to time, or as enacted heretofore, hereafter, things like that. And so your association attorney is going to make sure that your documents have that if you're amending them, or that your resolution has it correctly, so that any new state laws that get changed are automatically incorporated. I have seen a resolution that was very, very short, the attorney put together, and it said, we will follow all state statutes and our governing documents as provided, as needed, or something like that. It was great. So they're following those state statutes. So that's what the Kaufman language is. So again, that's for your association's legal counsel to work with. Couple questions about accepting the email votes. That was for condo specific, that law. So sorry, that was the divergence of where condo and HOA was a little different. So if for an HOA, if they are wanting to accept email votes, ask your association's legal counsel on that one. Not really sure why that wasn't updated in that statute as well that way. But yes, if you don't want to adopt an electronic voting platform and just want to have emailed ballots back, that's again up to your association to determine, and your owners to agree that they are going to waive that secrecy requirement. Another part of that statute that did change is that your owners can petition, if you're a condo, to have an electronic voting platform. So you might want to, carefully weigh the options there to determine whether you need to have it. It might be better for your association because you get that third party separation with that secrecy requirement, keeps you out of a lot of legal trouble that way. We don't mention that often, but really doing a service like that does help with that. So you'll have to weigh those type of options for your own association. I think we answered a few of these. Quorum not reached, then it's combined, yes, with those who came in. So that one's gone. That one's gone. We don't have recommendations for election monitors, unfortunately. Sorry, you'll have to do a little research on that yourself. We've had questions about pricing and things like that. we'll just throw it out there. We don't discuss price. It's usually dependent on the size of your association, so it's going to vary widely for everybody that's on this call today. So it's best to reach out to the different vendors that you're looking at when you determine that you like their platforms and their ease of use for your owners, and ask them what the cost is. Easy enough. I think there were some other questions about, can this be used for amendments and special assessments and things like that? So absolutely. We usually talk about elections because that's what we have every year that comes up. So that's what kind of we focus on. But yes, you can use the e-voting for other items as well.
Yeah, and then as far as
Yeah.
self-managed, will a board of directors get these results? We would just absolutely, as long as you have a third-party separation vendor that's tallying and just delivering those results. We do work with self-managed communities and who don't have management companies. So
Yeah. And even
Yes.
some of them will have an attorney or a CPA or a
Right.
separate individual
Right.
that will receive those results. So, make sure that you're making the best choice for your
Right.
community.
We've even had the League of Women Voters, things like that. Or if you have a committee, if you have an election committee, maybe it's one person on that committee is the assigned person to receive that and bring it to the meeting.
all right,
and
well, we
then
just have a
save
few
it in the
slides
records.
left. So do we want to
Okay.
dive into a couple of these misconceptions and myths?
Yes,
Let's
let's get
do.
through the myths. These are mostly just fun to
Do
read.
older owners want paper or technology, or do you think they'll go for technology?
Technology, I mean, the stats
We
are
think,
showing
yes,
it.
yeah.
We prove
We think
that.
that giving them the option is working. And most of them that are holding a phone, which I know a lot of older owners that are, have an email address. And I think people are becoming more and more comfortable with sharing that address. So, which goes into the next one, get started. You don't have to have all the email addresses to get started. We can assure you, you will have a much better list after e-voting is over of all current emails in your community. So it is a great place to start. Don't forget to use it as an opportunity to ask about notices as well. Ask your vendors, security, safeguarding, owner data. The answer should always be that they are using it for the purpose of running this vote or this amendment vote only, and they consider it the property of the community. So those are the things that you want to hear. And then we talk about nominations from the floor all the time. Those are kind of individual situations, but you're just going to handle them like you normally would. They're still going to come up. I'll let Liz take this slide.
Yeah, and what if someone votes via electronic and paper? Just make sure you're utilizing a vendor that gives you detailed reports to show you who is voting electronically, so you're not also taking their paper ballot. And then, is secret really secret? If you have a secrecy requirement, you need to make sure that your e-voting partner software can facilitate that. That's an important question. And if they're not asking it, then they're most likely not familiar with the state statutes, and you may want to consider looking at other industry vendors there, which I believe ACE probably has on their website as well, a list of vendors that you can look at. And then let's
And then
see.
this is a big one. What if no one comes forward to
Mhm.
run for the board? What if we don't get a single candidate? Oftentimes you still have to achieve quorum to hold that annual meeting. And maybe there are other items that you're voting on, your meeting minutes, anything that you might want your members to look at. So maybe you're just running a quorum only vote and you're hoping that someone will raise their hand, will take anyone, to step forward and help. Make them go through a vetting process like you would any other candidate. Make sure they're an owner of record and that you have all of that information before you can appoint them to the board. But it happens all the time. Not
All
all the time.
right.
It happens. Yeah.
Any others, Ruth, you see you want to point out on this slide?
Well, the one I is, keep in mind all the additional costs that you have when you are weighing things out. Oftentimes, yes, you think that the cost of e-voting is adding on to your paper. And initially, your first year, you might have to send a lot of paper still because everyone hasn't opted in for it. But over time, a year or two, your prices of paper go down, the mailers go down, notices, envelopes, all that extra processing. You have to include all that, all the time involved for your committees and your boards to door knock, to beg people to come, or if you do have to have reconvenes where you are, having to rent a place to have a meeting at, things like that, all that comes with time and expense and money. Time is money, right? So keep that in mind too. You want your manager to be freed up to be doing other things. You don't want them to have to go through that. So to me, e-voting, when we came across it, it was a big light bulb moment.
I agree. And, an end result is a trusted system, easy for owners to use and vote, no miscounted ballots, authenticated results, certified results. How are you going to get those? Much higher participation rate, achieving quorum, much more reliable. I think we know that is true. Email is instant. And then a duly elected board. So you're able to make
So
those
important.
decisions.
Yeah,
And
that's
have
so
that
important to have that duly
representation.
elected board.
It
Yeah.
is. Everyone is asking these days, do you have a duly elected board?
You
It's
know.
becoming more and more
And
important
when you
that you're achieving quorum at your meetings
when you
and
do have
having
that
duly
trusted
elected board.
system, you get so much less of that finger pointing. My vote wasn't counted correctly. Well, you got that receipt, so it's not people standing in the back of the room, or my ballot didn't arrive in time if you mailed it back and it showed up at the association. Kathy always says we made quorum by paper 2 weeks
2 weeks
after
after the meeting. Yeah, that's a great
those
day.
kind of things, some of those questions, all of that kind of concern goes away when you incorporate electronic voting. And again, keep in mind, we're not totally replacing it unless your association decides that you're not doing any in-person voting or any mailed voting. It's another option. So if you have people that still want paper, you're going to have to still provide it. But on the condo side, I should mention this too. If you do start offering electronic voting, you have to keep offering electronic voting.